Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it is the 11th of February, 2022. I'm usually ahead a year or two, and I don't know where 2020 came from here. Actually, I do know. I was just looking at a bunch of old episodes and making sure that I wasn't going to duplicate a name. And the last ones that I was looking at were 2020 and 2019, so it's not completely just me being out of time. I do have the 2022 down pretty well. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about Judgement. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, it's a thing that I think a lot about. You're going to be shocked to hear that there's some connection with Twitter and politics. So I'm still with her, trended today on Twitter, which again, it's 2022. Hillary ran in 2016. Carry the one, so that's like 6 years ago, right? I'm still with her. I get the sentiment. I get that, you're kind of upset about stuff. I'm still upset about Bernie. Come on. And including from that year. And I'm also quite upset still about the fact that I had to fucking campaign for Hillary. Well, I didn't have to. I decided to. But I could see Trump was so horrible. And I could see that he could easily win. And I campaigned for her. Grudgingly, admittedly, but I did. And I put a ton of effort into it, and I went out fucking in the sun and the heat, canvassing for her. Not really a thing that I enjoyed doing. And it was not, canvassing for Bernie was always like the worst case scenario. Even the people that didn't agree and weren't really open, they'd always sort of be understanding, and they would just think you were misguided, but they had sort of generally positive feelings toward him. And with Hillary, frankly, I've said this so many times I don't even need to repeat it again, but even the reliable high propensity voters for Democrats, generally speaking, people were ambivalent about her, and a lot of people just outright didn't like her. But nonetheless, the thing that I wanted to talk about here, and the reason that this came up is Trump, turns out, was doing some things with classified documents that were pretty fucked up, and also pretty bizarre, like flushing them down the toilet and eating them rather than burning them to destroy evidence. It doesn't really speak to somebody who's a great brain genius, so to speak. But, people do what they do. I don't know. But the thing is, Hillary was sitting there going like, I totally called this. I knew Trump was a bad guy. Now, here's the thing, but a couple of things actually. Knowing that Trump was a bad person, I honestly, when I was a little kid and I first learned about Trump, I kind of knew he was not a great guy. It wasn't like some obscure mystery that required this great insight to figure that shit out. The fact that so many people like him and voted for him despite that, it's a pretty big fucking condemnation, I'd say, of our country and the judgment of a lot of people. But he's not a good guy. Fucking given, honestly. So the fact that she caught that, not really a great tick in the box for her. But there's also the stupid Pied Piper thing, which, and I've talked about it before, and I'm not gonna go into it at great lengths here because it annoys me more than anything. But her campaign was so certain that he was the weakest of the Republican candidates in the Republican primary that they wanted to run against him. They're like, we got to get him into the nomination. And they worked to get him into the nomination so that he would be the opponent, thinking that they would set up sort of a rag doll that they could just knock down. And it didn't quite turn out that way. And I'm not saying that, he was definitely going to win when you put him up there, but the thing is, honestly, like, if you're going to be in a car and you're going to start flooring it. And you're in a road which is very narrow and has concrete walls on either side, and it's kind of windy. Now, you may be an excellent driver, right? You may be able to just slice through there. You might have a car that is in great shape. Everything is tuned perfectly. The steering is just on point. And you may have the technical capability of navigating that at extreme speed and doing it safely. But the thing is, you're taking a risk, and you're taking a needless risk. And you know that those walls are there, and you know that you're going stupidly fast, and you know that if anything goes wrong, you're in deep shit, right? Maybe dead. Putting someone like Trump, who we all know is bad, hopefully, into the nomination is a risk. Anyone who is nominated, I mean, you can't, independent of anything else, if somebody is nominated for one of the major parties at the presidential level, there's like a 50-50 chance, knowing nothing else, that they could win. That's not a risk that you should be willing to take. And beyond that, I mean, the reason that I went out and ate shit campaigning for her and made calls campaigning for her, and the reason also that, you know, I don't regret it, even though I'm sick to hell of so many people who still to this day again blame Bernie supporters for her loss, when, you know, honestly, like, I mean, I could come up with a dozen things that have much more to do with the fact that she lost. And, you know, honestly, there are things like, if Bernie had any negative contribution to that, it's got to be very small. And frankly, I mean, it's kind of silly. Like, you have to really squint and imagine, because he campaigned for her. I campaigned for her. The dude who was running the Tempe office was a Bernie guy, right? Not just half the volunteers or more that I was outgoing with, but the fucking guy who's coordinating the volunteers. Were a lot of Bernie people going for her. More Bernie people voted for her in 2016 than Hillary people voted for Obama in 2008. More of her supporters in the primary voted for fucking, what was it, McCain, against, or was it, I don't even know. It was McCain. It's all a blur anymore. Against Obama, than Bernie people voted for Trump. Now, to be somebody who's for Bernie and then going for Trump also screams of horrible judgment, because, yeah, the only argument I can even see that's remotely sane and debatable at that is sort of an accelerationist thing, like, oh, we're just going to make things so terrible that will push the revolution. It's the Susan Sarandon argument, who also, you know, she didn't vote for Hillary in 2016, and she regretted it later on, but people blame her like she has this, you know, godlike power over people. All these other celebrities came out for Hillary. One person came out against her, other than the people who were coming out for Trump. And it's such a weird thing. Like, I understand Trump is extraordinarily bad. Although he's not, you know, I mean, here, speaking of judgment, he's extraordinarily bad. And yet the Democrats now are doing fuck all to, you know, remotely regulate all of the voter suppression stuff, all of the things. The Republicans in state legislatures are making rules someplace between gerrymandering to an obscene level and basically saying, like, oh, the state legislature, if we want, we can just not certify the election. You know, we can just decide, like, oh, we don't like the popular vote, fuck that, we're going to change it. You know, and the people who did the right thing, the Republicans who did the right thing in 2020, they all got kicked out and replaced by people who would do the wrong thing come 2024. So we don't have protection against that. The Supreme Court is 6-3, and yeah, they may be 6-3 for abortion, but they're also 6-3 for doing terrible things like pushing Trump into the White House in 2024, if there's any kind of debate. they're 6-3 for going up against like, gerrymandering is not a big deal. We don't even care. Fuck the rest of the Voting Rights Act. We'll just tear that to shreds. And we don't care about any kind of it, be it racial or political. Already, there was a decision in, what was it, like 2012 or something now? So like 2013, damn near a decade ago, that killed the gerrymandering can't be done on a party basis, but retained the racial basis. And now the racial thing, like, just gerrymander however you want. Which is, this was shadow docket, so it's not like a proper decision now, but basically looks like it's heading that way. And so anyway, the Democrats are in the House, the Senate, the White House, and they're doing fuck all about the 6-3 court. They're doing fuck all about all of the things that the Republicans are doing. They're not even, like, one of the, if I was in office in 2020, like say I came in, I was a freshman, and I came in last January, the first thing that I would do, I'd be like literally talking to everybody. If I was in the House, I'd be making like 434 calls. Like I'd be talking to fucking everybody, literally, about like, we should really do something to kind of limit the president's ability to do all of these things that Trump did that just really kind of steamrolled the Constitution. And sort of, you find all of these gaps, all of these problems where there's just no control. Maybe fix those things. I don't know, call me crazy. But the Democrats are not doing that. And I think they're not doing it for two reasons. One, just being that, they're like, well, we don't want to tie the hands of the president because we're going to be president sometimes. And we want to be able to do whatever we can do. So, which is dumb and foolish and very short-sighted and selfish, but never mind. And then the other thing is, I think there are a lot of people, and I think this includes Garland, and I think it includes Pelosi, and probably Schumer, but Biden. A lot of people, they kind of know Trump is bad, but they think it's more of like an aesthetic thing. They think, I'm touching on the things that I talked about in the narcissism one, but people think, okay, he's just bad, but he's like unappealing. He's just ugly. He's gross. But he's not, he's pretty much normal. And the thing is, he's not. He's fucking dangerous. And he also, he's inherently in and of himself dangerous. And he also exposed a lot of stuff where if you got someone who was, a Trump-like figure who was just more calculating and a little bit more polished, a little bit less likely to trigger that sort of innate immune response that Trump did, they would be fucking dangerous as hell. So I don't know. It's just like I don't know. And then of course you have. Here's the thing that gets me. Like I have this feeling. I've talked about this many times, but I have this feeling like I'm just crawling in my skin, trying to like just thinking like I need to get the fuck out of here. It's almost like a loop in my head. Okay, maybe. Here's sort of the way that I think about it. Maybe it'll be fine. Maybe there'll be like a period that's tumultuous, and then 5 or 10 years from now, even if Trump gets reelected, maybe he goes through another term and things kind of sort themselves out, and then we get back to some kind of equilibrium that's reasonable. Maybe that's going to be the case. I don't think so, but it'd be great, It wouldn't be great, but it would suck to get there, but at least you got there. But there's enough of a risk that something will go very bad, very, very horribly wrong, that I just think about it and I'm like, I want to be nowhere near this kind of stuff. Just the prospect of, for example, a civil war. You think about that. And if we had a civil war, it's kind of fucking scary because I have neighbors all around here who have Trump flags, they have MAGA flags, they have Biden cheated flags, they have, they're like in fucking la la land. with this shit. And a lot of them have guns. And a lot of them, yeah, they're watching and consuming media that is telling them that basically, people like me are anti-American. They're trying to end their way of life or whatever kind of bullshit. And stuff that makes them kind of bristle in a way that's like, maybe we would start shooting people. Maybe we would start, doing harm to people. And you think about that, and it's like, I don't really want to be around for that. I'd kind of like to be away. I'd like to be someplace where I don't want to be in the crossfire either. And, I don't want to be in that situation. And maybe it's no big deal. Maybe it's just going to wash over. Maybe people will be sane and things won't get bad. But there are just so many things that you can think about that, and especially when you know a little bit of history and the way that civilizations can go from being pretty normal, things are kind of okay and under some kind of like, oh, people are generally law abiding and they won't really do anything bad, to people are like killing their neighbors. It's not that long of a bridge to cross. And it's certainly not one that's not been explored in great depth in human history. I mean, and you just think about that and you're like, I don't know. And the problem is, of course, it's like, where the fuck do I go? Where do I go? Because Canada is very tempting, right? But Canada is where this fucking truck convoy came from. And there's a stupid amount of alt-right shit that is kind of imported to the US from Canada, which is weird, but it's a thing. It's not this, and again, it's the problem. It's not like, even in Gilbert, there are plenty of people like me here, lefties and Democrats and liberals and whatever. It's a big mix. And maybe 30% of the people here are not insane, right? And maybe even of the people who they're like, oh, culturally Republican, but they're basically okay. But that's still a shit ton of people. And all it takes, like the amount of harm that one person can do with a gun or one of these big trucks that is basically a tank, if they're motivated, you can do so much fucking damage. Just one person. I mean, it's the thing about this convoy. It's like 100 trucks and they can just grind things to a halt. It's the same really as the Republicans in Congress, where if you're just interested in like getting in the way of the normal functioning of things and you don't really want to accomplish anything other than that, it's not that hard. It's hard to build a robust system that can tolerate that kind of stuff. And we certainly haven't done it. We haven't even thought about doing it really. So that's concerning. So anyway, Canada probably out. You think about like New Zealand, maybe? But New Zealand has, there's pretty much no place in the world that doesn't have at least some number of these people. And it's a problem because we have, as nice as certain things about Facebook may be, the fact that Facebook exists and sort of the internet in general means that the entire world is connected in a way that makes it almost impossible to have any area, any region that's populated without some distribution of people on a pretty broad spectrum. And some of those people are perfectly great, and some of those people are perfectly awful. And it doesn't really take that many perfectly awful people to really fuck things up terribly. And I just think about, like, even if people are not overtly like going out and shooting people, which, it's one of those things that sounds absurd. But if you imagine being in a lawless place, it's not that absurd. Like if people have point and click murder weapons, right? And if they want to, and especially if law and order starts breaking down, people can do stuff. And at a certain point, if enough people do bad stuff, it's overwhelming, and it just kind of happens, and it happens to just keep going on. And historically, that kind of thing doesn't last forever, but it's not good, and it's not like it just freaks me out. Anyway, and I don't really know where the fuck I would go. Europe has a lot of problems. Asia, maybe Japan, I don't know, maybe Singapore. Australia, I don't know, yeah, got a lot of problems. It's pretty much anywhere you go. And then there's also, like, if it was Australia, you're like, oh, I'm a settler. I guess there's another thing, technically any place I go, probably a settler. And there's always going to be people, like, wherever you would go, there are people who were there. So essentially, it's like a foreign body anywhere. But anyway, so just I'm a little concerned about that. Let's just say. I'm lucky because I'm in a position where I can actually think about this. I can think about getting the fuck out. I don't know, like, it wouldn't be like hyper easy for me, but I could do it. A lot of people just couldn't. And I talk to a lot of people. I talk with, it kind of scares me actually how many people I talk with who are having similar thoughts. Because if you were having these thoughts, right? And then you realize, oh, well, I'm just being paranoid and this isn't really real and there's no need for concern, or I'm just blowing this out of proportion. That's one thing, right? And it would be very comforting if it's like, I'm the only one and I'm Chicken Little. The sky is falling, and nobody else is, whether I was right or not, at least, you can kind of convince yourself, okay, I'm probably just not grounded and, out there. But I keep talking to people who are having similar concerns to varying degrees, mind you, but, some people think bad things are inevitable. Some people think that, a storm could come, but maybe not. I would say, it's maybe not inevitable, but more likely than not. I would say better than my judgment, for whatever that's worth. And this is not like some calculation that I've done or psychohistory predicting it, but I would say really, like, I feel like better than 50-50 chance that a storm comes, and a decent chance that that storm is pretty bad and fucked up and could be, either life-threatening or just very, very terrible for a lot of people. Infrastructure collapsing and basically the, people dropping to levels of poverty, or, like losing support from civilization that they've been counting on for a long time. It's not that hard. It's kind of concerning. So anyway, I'm just rambling here, but it's my judgment is just not reassuring me here, is all I'm saying. And I'm not saying my judgment is perfect. My judgment is flawed just as everybody else's is. But I do have a pretty decent track record, which is kind of disconcerting in itself, because it's like, when in 2016, when Hillary lost, I wasn't that surprised. Most of the people I knew were kind of surprised. And a couple of people actually commented that, like, everybody was really taken aback, but you, Scott. And because I was out there canvassing and campaigning for her because I fucking knew it could happen. And in retrospect, you get a lot of people who talk about how, oh yeah, I totally saw it. And I don't know why it bothers me, because it's fine. If you want to say that you did, that's fine. And I'm not trying to claim that I had some kind of special insight. But a lot of people at the time were shocked and taken aback. And now it's hard to find people who will admit to being shocked and taken aback by it. It's annoying. But I guess Gil, not that he created this, but likes to say, we're all the hero of our own story. And it's a thing, right? You kind of tell your own story, and in your version of your story, you probably embellish some things or gloss over some of the mistakes you made, all of this kind of stuff. So it's understandable, but it's a little annoying. It's also annoying because if people realize, like, oh shit, I totally thought Hillary had it in the bag and she lost, then maybe they would think, maybe my judgment, and I'm not saying that they need to say, okay, my judgment is terrible and unreliable for all time, but you could at least say, okay, maybe you made this big mistake, and maybe that's a reason to sort of work on your judgment and think about it and figure out, like, why did I guess wrong here? Why did I make a mistake? Was it just a complete coincidence and chance? Or was it something that I could have anticipated? And I would claim that it's something that you could have anticipated. And I would claim also that it's something that it was not that, like, unforeseeable, you know? And especially, I think one of the reasons that people were blind to it is people are so bubbled that, you know, they'd be in a bubble where all the people are voting for Hillary. They're like, everybody I know is voting for Hillary, and everybody thinks Trump is a joke. That's great in your bubble. But I talked to enough people who were not in that bubble that scared the shit out of me. Like, made me fucking nervous. That's also what makes me nervous here, because I talked to enough people who are outside of that bubble. And then you look at also, like, Garland just kind of fucking off. And I mean, okay, my mom says, and she's not alone, but a lot of people say, you know, this stuff takes time, and Garland is going to build up a case, and then they will indict Trump. And I personally believe he's never going to face any consequences at all. I'd be shocked. I'd be thrilled, don't get me wrong, but I would be fucking shocked. This is a testable prediction, by the way. It's 2022. We have a couple years till 24. I'm betting that Trump is not only the nominee, barring, you know, if he croaks, or if something comes up, or some new person, you know, some black swan type event comes up, maybe not. But barring something like that, I'm predicting he faces no consequences, never indicted, never charged, never convicted. Even at the state level, I doubt it, and especially at the federal level. And I look at that and I think odds are better than even money that he wins, I would say. And I would love to be proven wrong. This is, again, testable prediction. Come back, talk to me in, I guess, 2.5 years when it's November 2024, and tell me, please tell me, like, oh, Scott, you were such an idiot to be worried about this stuff. Scott, why were you thinking that Trump could win again? Because, yeah, I mean, obviously he wasn't going to. And he's just rotting in Rikers, or, you know, whatever the fuck. I would be thrilled to have my judgment be bad about this and to be wrong. I don't anticipate it, but I fucking love it. I would be thrilled. That's all I can say. Anyway, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling here at this point, and I'm not going to go on for too long. So, and I'm very tired, and I have a shit ton of work to do. So, with that, I'm going to call this for now, and I will come back probably next week, depending on how things are going. And it's frustrating. I would love, like, I can't imagine a scenario where this happens, but I would just love to, like, take a month or a month and a half off, even like a week, which is fucking thrilling, but, you know, take a decent amount of time off and just not have to worry about everything getting done, and just kind of, you know, relax and rest and recuperate. God, I know the word, and maybe I even said it right, I don't know, but what I heard myself say was not the right word, and I'm not even going to repeat it because I don't want to embarrass myself by repeating the same simple word and fucking it up multiple times. But it's just like, you know, I blame sleepiness. But anyway, we'll see. We shall see. So work on your own judgment, test mine, and tell me how I did. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Say Jen.